My name is Emily Carter, and I am 36 years old. For most of my life, I was known as the person who never said no. The daughter who always showed up. The sister who always helped. The person everyone called when something went wrong. And I used to think that meant I was loved. Until one morning, one simple message changed the way I saw my entire family. It was 6:42 on a Monday morning. My coffee was still sitting untouched on the kitchen counter when my phone lit up. It was my younger brother, Jason. His message was short. "Emily, can you send me $5,000 today? It's really important." I stared at the screen. Not because of the amount. Because of how normal it felt. No explanation. No apology. No question if I could afford it. Just an expectation. Like my bank account was a family emergency service that never closed. Then another message came. A picture. A brand new SUV sitting in a dealership parking lot. Under the photo, he wrote, "Mom says I deserve something reliable, after everything I've been through." I looked at that picture for almost a full minute. Because something inside me finally noticed what I had spent years ignoring. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody asked about my dreams. Nobody asked about the house I was trying to buy. But everyone knew exactly when they needed my money. I placed my phone on the table and walked away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't immediately open my banking app. I didn't calculate what I could sacrifice. I didn't tell myself, family comes first. Because that sentence had slowly become the reason I always came last. My name is Emily Carter. And this is the story of the day I stopped being my family's safety net. And started becoming my own. For years, my family had one simple belief. If Emily can help, Emily should help. It started with small things. At first, I didn't even notice. A grocery bill here. A utility payment there. A few $100s because someone was between paychecks. Every request came wrapped in the same sentence. Just this once. But somehow, just this once happened every few months. Then every month. Then every time someone had a problem. My brother Jason was always struggling. My mother always defended him. And my father always told me the same thing. "You're the responsible one, Emily." I used to take that as a compliment. I thought being responsible meant being valuable. I thought being needed meant being loved. But I was wrong. Because there is a difference between someone appreciating your kindness and someone depending on your silence. And my family had become very comfortable with my silence. What they didn't know was that 6 months earlier, I had started saving for something I had dreamed about my entire adult life. My own home. Nothing huge. Nothing luxurious. Just a small place where I could finally feel like something belonged to me. Every month, I moved money into a separate account. An account nobody knew about. Not my parents. Not my brother. Nobody. For the first time, I had something that wasn't for emergencies. It wasn't for fixing someone else's mistake. It wasn't for saving someone from consequences. It was mine. And that morning, when Jason asked for $5,000, I realized something terrifying. If I gave him that money, I wasn't just losing money. I was losing the future I had spent years building. But the hardest part wasn't the money. The hardest part was what happened when I finally said no. Because that's when I discovered something about my family that I wish I had learned years earlier. They didn't get angry because I couldn't help. They got angry because I finally stopped letting them use me. The strange thing about being the person everyone depends on is that nobody notices when you are the one who needs help. For years, I had become invisible in my own family. Not because they didn't see me, but because they only saw one version of me. The version who fixed things. The version who paid bills. The version who never complained. And once people get used to your strength, they start forgetting that strong people get tired too. After reading Jason's message that morning, I sat at my kitchen table for almost 20 minutes. My coffee was cold. My phone was still there. And that 5,000 request was still staring back at me. Normally, I would have already sent the money. I would have opened my banking app. Moved some things around. Maybe delayed one of my own payments. And then I would have smiled and told everyone. It's okay. That was my favorite lie. It's okay. I said it so often that people stopped asking if it really was. But that morning was different. Because for the first time, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What happens if I stop? Not what happens to Jason. Not what happens to my parents. Not what happens to the family. What happens to me? And honestly, I didn't know the answer. Because I had spent so much time being everyone's solution that I had forgotten who I was without that role. I picked up my phone and called Jason. He answered after the second ring. Hey, Em. Did you send it? No hello. No good morning. Just straight to the money. I closed my eyes. Because that one sentence told me everything. Jason, I said, I need to understand something. What happened? Why do you need $5,000? There was silence. Not the kind where someone is thinking. The kind where someone is annoyed that you asked. Seriously? He said. It's not a big deal. I just need help. I know you need help, I replied. But I need to know what I'm helping with. And that was the moment his voice changed. You know what, Emily? Forget it. I frowned. What? If you're going to make me explain everything, then forget it. I sat there quietly. Because I had heard that sentence before. Different person. Different situation. Same reaction. Whenever I asked questions, I became the problem. Whenever I wanted details, I became selfish. Whenever I protected myself, I became the bad person. Jason, I'm not saying no, I told him. I'm saying I want us to talk about it. He laughed softly. Not a happy laugh. A disappointed one. You've changed. Those 3 words hit harder than I expected. Because they were true. I had changed. But not in the way he meant. I hadn't become cold. I hadn't become selfish. I had simply started noticing things. Things like how my brother always had money for expensive dinners, but somehow never had money for bills. Things like how my mother always told me to understand Jason, but never asked Jason to understand me. Things like how everyone called me when they needed something, but disappeared when I needed someone. I'll call you later, Jason said. Then he hung up. I placed my phone down. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt something else. Something unfamiliar. Peace. But that peace didn't last long. Because about 30 minutes later, my mother called. And I knew immediately why. She didn't say hello either. She started with, Emily, what is going on with you? I looked out the kitchen window. What do you mean? Your brother said you refused to help him. I almost laughed. Because apparently, in my family, asking questions had already become refusing. Mom, I didn't refuse. I just wanted to know what was happening. She sighed. That heavy sigh mothers use when they want you to feel like you've disappointed them. Emily, your brother is struggling. I looked around my apartment. At the bills on my counter. At the house paperwork sitting beside my laptop. At all the things I had sacrificed quietly. Mom, when was the last time someone asked if I was struggling? Silence. A real silence this time. For a second, I thought maybe she understood. Maybe she finally saw it. But then she said the sentence that changed everything. You're stronger than him. And there it was. The same old story. I was strong. Jason was struggling. So I was supposed to carry both of us. I swallowed hard. Mom. Being strong doesn't mean I don't have limits. She didn't answer immediately. And when she finally spoke, her voice was softer. But her words hurt more. I just never thought my daughter would become this difficult. Difficult. That was the word. Not hurt. Not exhausted. Not forgotten. Difficult. Because the moment I stopped doing what everyone wanted, I became the problem. After we ended the call, I walked over to the small drawer beside my desk. The drawer where I kept everything I never wanted to look at. Old receipts. Bank transfers. Messages where people promised they would pay me back. I had avoided that drawer for years. Because deep down, I already knew what was inside. Proof. Proof that this wasn't one emergency. It wasn't one favor. It was a pattern. And that night, for the first time, I decided to open the drawer. I had no idea that what I found inside would change the way I saw my entire family forever. I opened the drawer at 9:17 that night. I remember the exact time because I had spent years avoiding that moment. Funny how we can remember the smallest details of the days when our lives change. The sound of the drawer opening. The cold feeling of the metal handle. The way my hands hesitated before touching the first piece of paper. Inside were years of my family's emergencies. A receipt from when I paid Jason's car repair. A bank transfer from when my mother needed help with medical bills. A screenshot of a message from my father saying, "Emily, we hate asking, but you're the only one we can count on." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Because that was the sentence that always worked. You're the only one we can count on. It sounded like love. It sounded like trust. But looking at it now, it sounded like a responsibility they had quietly placed on my shoulders. I grabbed a notebook and started writing. Date. Reason. Amount. Who asked. Who paid it back. The last column was almost empty. At first, I thought I would find maybe 10,000. Maybe 15,000. Something I could understand. Something I could explain away. But hour after hour, the numbers kept growing. 800 for Jason's car. 1,200 for my mother's credit card. 2,500 for a vacation deposit Jason promised he would return. 600 for groceries during a month my parents said they were short. Every amount had a story. Every story had a reason. And every reason had one thing in common. Me. By midnight, I had stopped feeling angry. I was just tired. The kind of tired that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself. I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. I knew how to work with numbers. That was my job. I worked in financial planning. I spent my days finding mistakes in other people's budgets. But somehow, I had never checked my own family. Maybe because checking meant admitting something I didn't want to believe. That I wasn't just helping. I was being depended on. The spreadsheet filled slowly. And then I saw the total. I stared at the screen. I counted it again. Then again. Because my brain refused to accept it. $38,460. $38,460. Almost $40,000. Gone. Not invested. Not saved. Not used for my future. Gone into keeping everyone else's life comfortable. I leaned back in my chair. And for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Because that amount wasn't just money. That was years of my life. Years where I said no to vacations. Years where I bought cheaper things because someone else needed help. Years where I delayed my own dreams because someone else's problem felt more urgent. And the hardest part? Nobody knew. Not really. They knew I helped. But they didn't know the cost. Because I never told them. I never showed them. I never complained. I had become so good at pretending everything was fine. That everyone believed me. The next morning, I woke up with one thought. I needed answers. Not a fight. Not revenge. Answers. So I called my father. He answered quickly. Emily, everything okay? I almost smiled. Because even that question felt strange. Everything okay? Nobody had asked that in years. I need to talk to you and Mom, I said. There was a pause. What happened? Nothing happened. I just need us to talk. My father was quiet. Then he said, "Is this about Jason?" I froze. Because I realized something. Everyone already knew. They knew there was a problem. They just expected me to continue carrying it. Why would you think that? Another pause. Then my father said, "Because your brother told us you were upset about helping him." I looked down at my spreadsheet. The 38,460 sitting there like a truth nobody wanted to see. "I think we all need to talk," I said. That evening, I went to my parents' house. The same house where I grew up. The same kitchen where my father taught me that family always takes care of family. I walked inside and saw my mother preparing dinner. My father was sitting at the table. And Jason was already there. Waiting. The moment I entered, I knew something was different. Nobody smiled. Nobody offered me food. Nobody asked about my day. They were prepared. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a trial. My mother looked at me and said, "Emily, we need to understand why you've become so upset over helping your own brother." I placed my bag on the chair. Then I slowly took out my laptop. "I think before we talk about why I'm upset, we should talk about what has actually happened." Jason looked confused. "What does that mean?" I turned the laptop around. The spreadsheet was open. And for the first time in years, my family was about to see the number. The number I had been carrying alone. The room went completely silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence. The kind where everyone knows something important is about to happen. My father looked at the laptop screen. My mother leaned forward. And Jason just stared at the numbers like they were written in a language he didn't understand. "What is this?" my mother asked. I took a breath. "It's everything I've paid for over the years." Jason frowned. "Emily, are you seriously keeping track of everything you've done for us?" That question hurt more than I expected. Because that was the problem. I wasn't keeping score. I was finally looking at the score that had always existed. "No," I said quietly. I wasn't keeping track. I was avoiding it. Nobody said anything. So I continued. For years, every time someone needed help, I told myself it was love. I told myself families don't count things. I looked at my father. But I think I confused love with responsibility. My mother's face changed. Not anger. Not sadness. Something in between. "Emily, nobody forced you to help." And she was right. Nobody held a gun to my head. Nobody threatened me. That was the hardest part to explain. Because the pressure wasn't loud. It was quiet. It came in the form of guilt. It came in the form of disappointment. It came in the form of being called the strong one. "I know nobody forced me," I said. But every time I needed to say no, I felt like I was hurting everyone. Jason crossed his arms. "So what? Now we're supposed to feel bad because you helped?" I looked at him. And for the first time, I saw something clearly. He wasn't angry because I had suffered. He was angry because my suffering had become visible. "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" I looked down at the spreadsheet. "I'm saying I need this to stop." The words came out softly. But they felt heavier than anything I had ever said. My father leaned back. "Stop helping your family." "No." I shook my head. "Stop being the only person responsible for everyone's problems." My mother looked away. Because somewhere deep down, she knew I was right. But knowing something and accepting it are two different things. Jason stood up. "So this is about money." I almost laughed. Because that was exactly what everyone wanted to believe. That I was becoming selfish because of money. But this was never about money. Money was just the evidence. "No. Jason. This is about respect. He stared at me. I respect you. Then why do you only call me when you need something? Silence. Real silence. My brother didn't have an answer. And that scared me more than if he had yelled. Because sometimes silence tells you everything. My father finally spoke. Emily, your brother has always needed more support than you. I nodded slowly. I know. And you have always been the one who can handle things. I looked at him. Can handle things. That phrase. I had heard it my whole life. But suddenly it sounded different. Because nobody ever asked what it cost me to handle things. My father sighed. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. And there it was. The sentence people use when they want you to stop talking about something uncomfortable. You've given us $38,000, I said. How is that small? Nobody answered. Because numbers don't argue. Feelings can be manipulated. But numbers just sit there. My mother started crying. Emily, we are family. I looked at her. I know. Then why are you doing this? I swallowed. Because I want to stay family. Everyone looked confused. I continued. Because I don't want a relationship where the only reason people need me is because I can pay. My mother wiped her tears. But your brother is struggling. I nodded. I believe that. Then help him. I have. I pointed at the spreadsheet. 4 years. Jason looked uncomfortable now. But then his expression changed. And I knew he was about to say something that would hurt. You know what your problem is, Emily. I stayed quiet. You think because you have money. You're better than everyone. The words landed hard. Because that was not what I felt. Not even close. I don't think I'm better than anyone. I looked at him. I think I'm tired. That was the first time I said it. Out loud. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just tired. And for some reason. That was the sentence nobody knew how to answer. The conversation ended without anyone apologizing. Without anyone admitting they were wrong. I left my parents' house that night carrying the same laptop I brought in. But something had changed. Because for the first time, I wasn't carrying their problems with me. I was carrying the truth. And I thought that was the hardest part. I was wrong. Because 2 days later, my father called me. And what he said on that phone call would force me to make the biggest decision of my life. 2 days after that conversation, my father's name appeared on my phone. I stared at the screen for almost 10 seconds. Because my father was not the type of person who called to talk about feelings. He believed problems became smaller if nobody talked about them. That was how he was raised. That was how our whole family worked. We didn't solve things. We waited for them to disappear. I answered. Hey, Dad. There was a long pause. Long enough that I knew something was wrong. Emily. His voice sounded different. Not angry. Not disappointed. Just tired. I need you to understand something. I sat down at my kitchen table. Okay. He took a breath. Your mother and I are worried about you. I almost smiled. Because after everything, that was the first time someone said they were worried about me. But then he continued. We think you've let this money situation change you. And there it was. The concern had a condition. They weren't worried that I was hurting. They were worried that I had stopped being useful. Dad. I haven't changed. You have. I looked out the window. No. I just started saying what I should have said years ago. Silence. Then he said. Your brother really needs this help. I closed my eyes. Because somehow, every road still led back to Jason. How much does he need? Another pause. 5,000. I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny. Because I finally understood the pattern. The amount changed. The person changed. The emergency changed. But the answer was always supposed to be me. Dad, do you know how much I've already given? I know you've helped. No? My voice became firmer. You know that I helped. You don't know how much. He didn't answer. So I told him. $38,460. Nothing. Not one word. And that silence told me everything. Because nobody had ever asked. Nobody had ever wondered. Nobody had ever thought there might be a limit. Finally, my father said something I will never forget. Money isn't everything, Emily. I looked at the spreadsheet still sitting on my desk. No, Dad. It's not. I paused. But apparently, it's the only thing everyone remembers when they need me. His breathing changed. I knew I had hurt him. But sometimes the truth hurts because it touches something real. You're our daughter, he said. Yes. And family takes care of family. I closed my eyes. That sentence. The sentence I had heard my entire life. Family takes care of family. But I finally heard what it really meant. In my family, it meant the person who had the most gave the most. The person who was responsible carried everyone. The person who stayed quiet was expected to keep staying quiet. Dad, I want to take care of my family. I spoke slowly. But I can't keep destroying myself to prove that I love them. He didn't respond. And then he said something that made my heart stop. Sometimes you have to sacrifice for the people you love. I looked around my apartment. At the boxes I had packed for my future home. At the savings account I had protected for years. At the life I was finally trying to build. And I realized something. I had been sacrificing for so long. That nobody remembered I was sacrificing. They thought it was normal. They thought it was my role. Dad, I whispered. What would happen if I needed help? The question came out before I could stop it. And for a few seconds, there was silence. A painful silence. Because neither of us knew the answer. Nobody had ever prepared for the possibility that I might be the one who needed saving. I don't know, he finally said. And that hurt more than anger would have. Because it was honest. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Jason. I expected another argument. Another accusation. But it wasn't. It was a picture. A screenshot of a conversation between him and my mother. And underneath it, Jason wrote. Maybe you should see this. I opened the screenshot. And what I read made my hands go cold. Because I discovered something my family had never told me. Something that changed everything. My brother hadn't just been asking for money. He had been telling everyone a completely different story. And somehow, I was the villain in it. I stared at the screenshot on my phone. For a moment, I didn't even understand what I was reading. The words were right there. Clear. Simple. And somehow impossible to accept. It was a conversation between my mother and Jason. My mother had written. Your sister is being difficult right now, but give her some time. She always comes around. And Jason replied. She thinks she's better than us now. Ever since she started making more money, she acts like we are a burden. I read that sentence again. Then again. Because it wasn't the anger that hurt. It was the fact that my own brother believed it. After everything. After every bill. Every emergency. Every time I showed up. Somehow, I had become the selfish one. I locked my phone screen and placed it on the table. Then I sat there quietly. And something strange happened. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I felt free. Because for years, I had been trying to convince myself that maybe they didn't realize what they were doing. Maybe they didn't understand how much I had sacrificed. Maybe they just needed me to explain. But that message showed me something different. They understood. They just saw it differently. To them, my help was not a sacrifice. It was my responsibility. The next morning, I made a decision. I was done explaining myself. I had spent years proving that I was a good daughter. A good sister. A good person. But good people need boundaries too. I called Jason. He answered quickly. Did you see it? Yes. There was silence. Emily, I didn't mean for you to see that. I almost smiled. Because that was always the problem. People were sorry when the truth became visible. Not when they were doing it. Jason. Do you really think I'm better than you? He didn't answer. And that was enough. I don't think I'm better than anyone. I continued. I just got tired of being the person everyone expects to fix everything. He sighed. You make it sound like we used you. I looked down at the spreadsheet. $38,000. Years of evidence. You didn't use me because I helped. I said quietly. You used me because you expected me to keep helping. Another silence. Then his voice became defensive. You know what? Maybe we should just stop asking you for anything. That sentence was supposed to hurt. It was supposed to scare me. But instead, it gave me peace. Because I finally understood something. A relationship that disappears when the money disappears was never built on love. Maybe that's what we need, I said. He hung up. And for the first time in years, I didn't call back. I didn't apologize. I didn't try to fix the uncomfortable feeling. I let it exist. And that was harder than any bill I had ever paid. The next few weeks were quiet. Almost too quiet. My mother stopped calling. My father sent short messages. My brother didn't contact me at all. And I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It did. Because setting boundaries doesn't magically remove the pain. Sometimes doing the right thing still feels lonely. There were nights when I picked up my phone and wanted to text them. There were moments when I wondered if I had gone too far. Maybe I should just send the money. Maybe I should apologize. Maybe keeping the peace was easier. But then I would look at my savings account. The account I had protected for years. The account that represented my future. And I would remind myself. I wasn't choosing money over family. I was choosing not to disappear inside my family. A month later, something unexpected happened. I received a message from someone I never expected. My niece, Lily. Jason's daughter. She was 15 years old. Quiet. Smart. The kind of kid who noticed everything, but rarely said anything. Her message was simple. Can I talk to you? I called her immediately. Her voice was nervous. Aunt Emily. What's wrong? Sweetheart. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said. I need to tell you something about the money. My heart started beating faster. What money? The party. I froze. Because I had almost forgotten about the birthday party that started everything. The expensive plans. The requests. The arguments. Then Lily said something that changed the way I saw the entire situation. I never wanted that party. I didn't speak. I told Mom I didn't want the big one. I just wanted something small with my friends. My throat tightened. Then why didn't you say anything? She laughed softly. A sad little laugh. Because everyone was so excited about proving they could give me the best party. That sentence stayed with me. Because suddenly I realized. The person everyone claimed they were helping was the person nobody had actually asked. And then Lily said the words that made me understand what had really been happening in my family. Aunt Emily. I think everyone forgot that I was the reason for the party. I didn't know what to say after Lily said those words. I think everyone forgot that I was the reason for the party. Because she was right. Everyone had been fighting about the money. The expectations. The image. The perfect celebration. But somewhere along the way, they forgot the one person the celebration was supposed to be about. The birthday girl. Lily, I said softly. Why didn't you tell me this before? She was quiet. Then she said, "Because I knew everyone would be upset." That sentence broke something inside me. Because she sounded exactly like I had sounded my entire life. A child who learned too early that other people's emotions were more important than her own. "You know what?" I told her. "You don't have to protect everyone all the time." There was silence. Then she asked, "Isn't that what families do?" I looked around my apartment. At the life I was finally learning to protect. And I answered honestly. Families protect each other. I paused. But that doesn't mean one person has to disappear so everyone else can be comfortable. After we ended the call, I sat there thinking about Lily. And I realized something. The pattern wasn't just hurting me anymore. It was being passed down. A child was already learning that love meant sacrifice. That happiness came with a price. That keeping people pleased mattered more than being honest. And I knew I couldn't change my whole family. But maybe I could change what Lily learned from me. The next day, I called Jason. Not because I felt guilty. Not because I was giving in. But because I finally understood the difference between fixing someone and showing up for someone. He answered after a few rings. "Emily." His voice sounded surprised. "I want to talk about Lily." A pause. "What about her?" "I talked to her." His tone changed immediately. "What did she say?" I took a breath. "She said she never wanted the big party." Silence. Long silence. Then Jason said, "She's just being a teenager." And there it was again. The same thing my family always did. Ignoring the truth because accepting it was uncomfortable. "No, Jason." My voice stayed calm. "She's being honest." He didn't answer. "She doesn't need a huge party. She needs parents who listen to her." I expected anger. I expected him to defend himself. But instead, he became quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I heard something different. Not anger. Not entitlement. Shame. "I thought I was giving her something I never had," he finally said. I listened. I grew up feeling like we didn't have enough. I wanted her to have everything. My heart softened slightly. Because this was the first honest thing he had said to me. "But Jason," I said, "giving someone everything you never had doesn't always mean giving them what they actually need." He didn't respond. A few days later, something happened that I never expected. My father came to my apartment. He had never done that before. Not once. He stood outside my door holding a small envelope. I invited him in. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, he sat down. "I found something." He handed me the envelope. Inside was a check. Not a large one. Not enough to fix everything. But enough to surprise me. "What is this?" He looked uncomfortable. "Some money I saved." I stared at him. "Dad." He looked away. "I know it's not close to what you gave us." His voice became quiet. But I realized something. I waited. "I spent years telling you that family takes care of family." He swallowed. "But I forgot that meant you too." That was the first time my father admitted it. Not perfectly. Not dramatically. But honestly. And sometimes, a small truth after years of silence feels bigger than 1,000 apologies. "I was wrong," he said. The words were simple. But coming from him, they meant everything. "I thought because you were strong, you didn't need anything." I looked down. "That's the problem, Dad," I whispered. Everyone thought that. We sat there quietly. And for the first time, the silence between us wasn't punishment. It was understanding. Before he left, he stopped at the door. "Your mother is still struggling with this." I nodded. "I know. And Jason?" He paused. "He wants to talk." I looked at him. "Really talk?" My father nodded. Really talk. And I realized something. Maybe my family wasn't fixed. Maybe some things would never go back to how they were. But maybe that wasn't the goal. Maybe the goal wasn't returning to the old version of our family. Because that version required me to keep hurting. Maybe we were building something new. Something healthier. Something where love didn't have to come with a bill. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Jason at a small coffee shop. And he said something I never expected to hear. Something that proved people can change. But only when they finally face the truth. I sat across from Jason at that coffee shop. And for the first time in months, neither of us was trying to win. There was no argument. No accusations. No list of everything the other person had done wrong. Just two siblings sitting across from each other, trying to figure out what was left after the truth came out. Jason looked different. Not physically. Something in his face had changed. The confidence he used to carry was gone. I owe you an apology, he said. I didn't say anything. Because I had heard apologies before. The kind people give when they want the problem to disappear. But this one felt different. I spent years telling myself you helped because you wanted to. He looked down at his coffee. I never stopped to think about what it cost you. That sentence meant more than I expected. Because I didn't need him to say I was right. I didn't need him to admit he was a bad person. I just needed him to finally see me. I was wrong too, I said. He looked surprised. About what? I thought if I kept giving, people would understand how much I loved them. I smiled sadly. But sometimes people don't see your sacrifices. Sometimes they only see what they have become used to receiving. Jason nodded slowly. I guess we both had things to learn. For the first time in years. We talked like brother and sister. Not like a person asking. And a person providing. A few months passed after that. Things didn't magically become perfect. Real life doesn't work like that. My mother didn't suddenly become someone who understood everything. My father still struggled with old beliefs. Jason still had moments where he wanted to ask for help before trying to solve things himself. But something had changed. The rules had changed. There were no more surprise requests. No more emotional pressure. No more making me feel guilty for protecting myself. And the biggest change came from Lily. A few months after everything happened, she called me. Aunt Emily. Hey. Sweetheart. I opened my first savings account today. I smiled. That's amazing. I want to learn how you make those spreadsheets. I laughed. Why? Because I want to know what things really cost before I decide I want them. I sat there quietly. Because in that moment, I realized the lesson wasn't about money. It was never about money. The lesson was about understanding your own value. Knowing that kindness doesn't mean having no limits. Knowing that love doesn't require you to destroy yourself. Knowing that saying no doesn't mean you stopped caring. Sometimes, saying no is the only way to make sure the love that remains is real. A year after that first message from Jason, I finally moved into my own home. The little 2-bedroom place I had been saving for. It wasn't perfect. The kitchen cabinet was old. The backyard was small. The paint needed work. But when I stood inside that empty living room, I cried. Not because I was sad. Because for the first time in my life, something belonged to me. Not because I earned it by helping someone. Not because someone needed me. Not because I sacrificed something. Just because I worked for it. And I deserved it. My family still has problems. Every family does. But now, when someone calls me, I don't immediately ask, how much do you need? I ask, how are you? And if they need help, I decide. Not from guilt. Not from fear. Not because I'm afraid they will leave. But because I genuinely want to. There is a difference. A few months later, I received a message from my mother. It was simple. I miss you. I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Because once upon a time, I would have immediately responded. I would have apologized. I would have tried to make everything better. But this time, I answered differently. I miss you too. And nothing more. No fixing. No explaining. No carrying. Just honesty. And slowly, we started rebuilding. Not the old relationship. A new one. A healthier one. One where I was their daughter. Not their solution. One where I was their sister. Not their emergency fund. One where I was Emily. Not the person everyone called when life became difficult. I learned something important through all of this. The people who truly love you may not always like your boundaries. They may struggle when you change. They may even be angry when you stop doing what benefited them. But real love survives honesty. Real love survives limits. Real love does not disappear when the money stops. Because love was never supposed to be something you had to earn. It was supposed to be something you were allowed to receive. So if you're listening to this, and you're the person everyone depends on, the person who always pays, the person who always says yes, remember this. You can love people and still protect yourself. You can be generous and still have boundaries. You can be a good person without becoming everyone's rescue plan. Sometimes the most loving thing you can say is not yes. Sometimes the most loving thing you can say is no. Because the moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment you finally start choosing yourself. And that was the day I stopped being my family's safety net and became my